Hey everybody, it's Hollywood Joe from Hollywood's World of Sports, coming to you tonight because NASCAR season is officially underway. We started last Sunday, actually 2 Sundays ago now, because yesterday was Sunday, and the Daytona 500. And Daytona was a really, really interesting race. Lots of crashes, lots of aggression. But one thing that I noticed coming out of Daytona was the altercation between Bubba Darrell Wallace Jr. and Denny Hamlin. Raced each other pretty hard, all that good stuff. And during Bubba's post race interview, he said something of the effect that Denny was going to need some Adderall to watch the replay of what happened. And Denny did not take too kind to those comments. He kind of got really angry, almost as he was thinking that Bubba broke some sacred code or secret code among the drivers. Because then Denny went on to joke about how 70% of the drivers, take Adderall, before the races or whatever. And Kevin Harvick then jumped in and said that Denny was out of line, probably should have not have made those comments, and said that most of the garage was upset with Denny. And the one thing I find interesting about all this is I feel like, even during the off season before Daytona started, I feel like the veteran drivers are really taking shots at the younger drivers. I've noticed it with obviously Denny and Bubba, but even last year, Denny taking out Chase Elliott. Uh, I've noticed it a lot towards the end of last year and into this year. And even Kyle Busch making the remarks before the season started how he's upset and disappointed that NASCAR is pushing the youth movement in the sport. And the thing of it is, guys, is I really think the veteran drivers are very insecure right now. I think they're worried. I think they're scared because look at Matt Kenseth, uh, one of the greatest of all time, at least in the last 20 years. I would say Matt Kenseth ranks right up there among the greats with what he's done in the sport. Got released by Joe Gibbs at the end of the season. And no disrespect to guys like Casey Kane, Eric Amarola, Paul Menard, no disrespect to those guys, but the fact that Matt Kenseth, who was still winning, still performing well, didn't get a job, and those three did. This it doesn't sit right with me. And I think honestly, I think that's one of the reasons Carl Edwards left because I think Gibbs wanted to get younger. They have Suarez, who's a young driver. They have Eric Jones now, who's a young driver. And I've also noticed with Hendricks, even though Dale Jr. retired on his own, as far as I know, look who they brought in: Alex Bowman, William Byron. All they replaced Casey Kane and Dale Jr. respectively. Hendricks has got a great young upcoming team, except for Jimmy Johnson, who's the oldest guy uh, on the team, and possibly I think he might be the oldest in the sport right now. I think there's a couple of guys that are up there like him and Kurt Busch, and but NASCAR's getting younger, and you know what? They went through this phase before when guys like Waltrip, Petty, both Petties, like those guys, when those guys started retiring. You had like Jeff Gordon come through the ranks. You had Jimmy Johnson come through the ranks. Tony Stewart, Kurt Busch, Ryan Newman. I could think of Brad Keselowski. Like a lot of these, this is not the first time NASCAR has had a youth movement. Fortunately for NASCAR fans, they have been very lucky over the last 20 years and didn't have to take on a whole lot of change. But it's coming. I mean, it's already here if you think about it. The youth movement is here in NASCAR. And I like the fact that, uh, you can only compete for one championship in the three circuits of the Monster Energy Cup, Camping Truck World Series Cup, and the Xfinity Series. I think it's smart that the Cup racers are only limited to a certain amount of races in the Xfinity Series because the Xfinity Series needs to grow. They need to develop their drivers. And it's funny. It's funny because lately we've been talking a lot about development in sports as it relates to things like college basketball to the NBA, farm system and baseball to Major League. I think NASCAR does it perfectly. You start out in the NASCAR like touring series, or you start out your local NASCAR track. For example, where I'm from, Berlin is the local NASCAR track, and prior to this year, Kalamazoo Speedway was a local NASCAR track. And these guys worked their way up to the local tracks, to the touring series, and then if you're good enough, you're in the truck series, and then you move to Xfinity, and then if you're really proven, you get to go to the Monster Energy Cup Series. And to me, I'd say NASCAR's got the best developmental process out there, honestly. Um, because there's not a lot when you get to the Monster Energy Cup, there's not really a lot of bad drivers. I would say out of the 40 cars that compete every week, I would say 35 of them usually have a chance to win and can compete. I think the other five there are just there because their owners have money to put a car on the track. Just my opinion. Uh, but like I said, NASCAR's getting young people. I know from what I've heard that viewership from the Daytona 500 was 23% lower than it was last year. And I got a feeling that's because Dale Earnhardt Jr. was no longer racing, which, I mean, you had to know he ain't going to drive forever, people. That's just a given. We all love Dale Earnhardt Jr., most popular driver, like what, 14, 15 years in a row or something of that nature. Um, but people had to know he wasn't going to last forever. And you know what? Yes, NASCAR is probably going to struggle this year. Have no doubt about it. But there are a lot of great, crazy, and wild personalities in the sport right now. So people really need to start paying attention to some of these young guys, veteran guys. You better start performing if you want to keep your job. Because even this year already, Jimmy Johnson, yeah, I'm saying it, Jimmy Johnson, 7-time champion, has been dominant for the last decade and a half. Spun out in the Clash, spun out in the dual race. Granted, those are exhibition races, but they're at Daytona nonetheless, and wrecked in the Daytona 500. Bad start. When I thought it might get better, crashes out at Atlanta. So that's 4 races in a row that Jimmy Johnson has spun out, wrecked out, finished terribly. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a 7-time champion like Jimmy Johnson. I'm telling you, he's either going to be forced to retire or he's going to have to step up his game again and start performing well, because this is not a good way to start off a season by finishing like finishing bad in every race. And like I said, the first two races were exhibition races, didn't count for points. But the fact that this has happened 3 weeks in a row now is not good. I mean, it's not good. And these veteran drivers that I spoke of better be panicking, and they better start panicking fast because there's a lot of great drivers in the Xfinity Series right now. There are a lot of great drivers in the Truck Series right now, and every last one of them will take your spot if they have to. You know, like I said, Matt Kenseth, perfect example. And Matt Kenseth, to me, was still on top of his game. Matt Kenseth could have easily won a championship last year. And actually, the last 2 years, if you think about it. And guess what? He's out of a job. He's not racing this year. So imagine what an owner would do to you if you're not performing well, if you're not on top of your game, if you're not in contention of winning a championship. And that means guys like, again, Kurt Busch, Jimmy Johnson, Ryan Newman, drivers that are kind of getting up there. I would be very insecure. I would be very, very worried about my spot in the sport because of all the young and hungry drivers coming up. So, again, we have started off really wildly this year. That's the word I want to use, especially at Daytona. Uh, who knows how many drivers are really taking Adderall? I still, I still think Bubba's comments were hilarious. I'm just gonna throw it out there right now. Bubba Wallace is a funny and entertaining guy to listen to. So pay attention to him in the next few years. But like I said, this NASCAR season is going to be very interesting. I know people will say, "Oh, NASCAR is not a sport; they're just making left turns, all this other garbage." But you know what? You get in a car and drive 200 miles an hour on a track, and you tell me how easy it is. So, with that being said, I'm going to sign off for the night. Like I said, NASCAR, very interesting times right now. Uh, so before I go, be sure to check me out on Facebook and Twitter. Obviously, you're here on YouTube, so you already know how to get to my YouTube page. And be sure to check out the website, Hollywood's World of Sports. And remember, as always, controversy doesn't come without criticism.